We can see your
Okay.
screen, so it's great.
Yeah?
Yes.
Looks good. Okay, because I just made an HTML file for my slides instead of using PowerPoint.
No worries, no worries. We can actually see the title supply chain remediation beyond the pipeline. So yeah, if I'm able to see it, I think other people are able to see it as well.
Okay, cool. All right, I need it to not show that. All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Tawni. I'll just give you a quick introduction. I am a full stack developer. I've recently moved into application security. So, thankfully, because of Tarek, I have been able to practice, talking about all things security in this space. And so I'm really grateful of that because it gives me the practice and experience that I need to do this. So,
One question as well before we continue. Do you want the question at the end, or do you want to be more interactive, like on the fly? What would you like?
I'm fine with both. I did leave a Q&A panel slide at the end just in case, but if you guys have any questions mid,
I have one big question for you.
Sure.
I think you would have wished that I was not here today, huh? But
what? No.
Why did you want to move to? I don't want to say switch because basically I think that you're still using the skills that you learned previously. But why are you interested to work in application security?
Oh, that's such a good question, actually. Okay. So the reason is kind of a lot of reasons. But the main one is when I was a developer, some of my biggest pain points were security related. So some of my senior projects were all trying to solve security problems and pipeline problems. So when I was working, I went out on my own and I started building my own apps. And then I realized I couldn't avoid security anymore. So yeah, after I learned kind of what it was that I was missing, I decided that I wanted to be the person who helps other developers at least understand security or decide that they want to code securely regularly would be great. So that's why. Hopefully that's a okay answer.
And I think it's a great answer, and I think it's very, very important.
We can't hear you.
Sorry.
I think someone's mic might be on. I should have muted everyone.
Yeah. No worries. So I think it's very great answer, especially with everything that is happening nowadays. Because a lot of developers are asking themselves the question like, okay, now that coding is not the bottleneck anymore, what is my place in the world? What is my place as a dev? If I'm only thinking about writing code, that's why to be honest, I love your story and the fact that you really understood even before it even happened that you needed to take a step back on your own job to basically go to what matters the most today, security. So I love it so much.
Yeah, it absolutely does matter the most. And I think that's kind of my thing is as a developer, we weren't encouraged to code securely or to consider security at all, honestly. And so I kind of spent the early part of my career not worrying about it until I had to worry about it, until it was my problem. And that's my problem with the world today. So, yeah. So that's my little backstory about how I got here. So I've been doing application security for like 6 months.
Stay silent and you can continue, but I think it's amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, honestly, like I said, Tarek, it's really great that you do this with us and we all do this together. I love this community. I have enjoyed its many meetings and evolutions and just kind of being a part of a little group of people who are motivated to upskill and like do presentations and just share knowledge with each other. So I love these. I think if you have questions, feel free, because this is as much practice as it is for me. Just I need feedback. So I'd love your feedback. So today's talk is about supply chain remediation. And the reason I chose this topic is because my first application security project was building a pipeline. So when I was a developer, the pipeline was the security problem that I was always facing, because it was really slowing down my developer productivity, and I was frustrated. So I had to learn how to build a pipeline myself. And in that process, this talk happened. So, all right. So the talk that, the central point of this talk is basically what happens when you build a security pipeline and it actually flags a critical CVE. So I'll give you the backstory on this case, because the story today isn't about my particular CVE that I opened a PR for. It's more about the process and the remediation process and the experience and just the knowledge of supply chain. So the big thing with when you find a CVE, or even when it gets alerted through your pipeline, you're most likely you're going to have like a response time. So for me, that response was about a day, because I went to bed, pipeline was green, and I woke up in the morning and my pipeline had failed, and it's because a new CVE was published. So this is what happens when the alert fires, and what do you do next stage. So this is kind of what I found in the process. So to break it down, supply chain security has two different types of risk. So the first is that there's actually vulnerable software. That is when like a CVE is published with a CVSS score. But most of the time, it's actually never exploited. And let me grab this person in here really fast. Sorry, guys. We're getting people still. Okay, so I was watching Coffee Chaos and ProdSec recently, and there is an episode that they did with open source malware that kind of helped me do a lot of the research for supply chain security, because it was happening and it was on topic. So if you haven't checked them out, they're probably my favorite resource for supply chain and open source, because if anything happens, I get notifications right away from them. So all my citations are at the bottom of the slides, just FYI. And then the other type of risk is malicious software. So that's code that was intentionally built to do harm. So that's things like typo squatting, account takeovers, or supply chain worms, which is really popular right now with Shai Hulud. So because there's no CVE for that one and no severity score, it's more risky, we should say. So, okay, so my particular CVE, because I've only actually had my pipeline flag one at this point, which I guess is good for the amount of time that I've had it open. I think I built my pipeline 2 months ago, and in the middle of the build was when my CVE showed up. So that CVE was a dependency called Protobuf, and it was ranked as a 9.4 critical. And so basically on paper, it allows an arbitrary JavaScript execution through a malicious protobuf schema. and that will give access to credentials, environment variables, internal systems, and the possibility of lateral movement. So pretty scary on paper. I think my first thought was like to panic, because I was like, oh no, there's like a critical CVE. What do I do? So I had to figure out like how am I going to remediate this? Like, what is the remediation process? So the main thing that I found interesting in researching this is that Protobuf has about 50 million weekly downloads on NPM. And so as soon as that CVE is flagged, that many people are still downloading the dependency. And so if you kind of try to rough estimate those numbers, it's a pretty decent amount of people that are exposed to the vulnerable dependency. So that was kind of my motivation, not only to remediate my own software and pipeline, but to like actually go and try to open a PR for it and stop the wider supply chain problem outside of just my pipeline, which if you guys have all heard of security fairies, I was the security fairy that day. So because I think kind of the running joke is that open source code isn't like managed very well, and so unless a security fairy is coming by to make fixes, they might not go fixed. So in this case, public proof of concept was published, and so it was a pretty straightforward attack if you were going to exploit it. However, I guess I should explain this first. So this is just kind of the explanation for what actually was happening. So Protobuf loads schemas, and if you think of it like a form or a paper form with labeled boxes, the layout, the labels, and the kind of things that go in the box are in the schema, and it's the template, not the actual answers that someone fills in. So if two programs are talking to each other, they use a name for the template, and if you don't escape it in JavaScript, then the program will just run it. So essentially, someone got the template and they could add whatever malicious code they needed to execute if they were to exploit it. So I found this. Actually finding the CVE was kind of tricky because it wasn't the top layer of my dependency tree. So I was using a dependency called Application Insights at the time. And so when my pipeline fired, it said that I had a Protobuf. And I was like, wait, I don't even use that. So I had to go actually pull down the Application Insights repo and then trace down. I pulled 4 different layers until I finally found the dependency that was the vulnerable dependency. And then that was where the actual attack surface was. So essentially, when you're talking about like whether or not your CVE is exploitable, you want to kind of consider how reachable top layer or your immediate project dependency, probably a higher risk, at least in this case. And then, you know, the more they have to move through your dependency tree, the more reachable it is. So, so you can find out if you have a vulnerable dependency by just using npm ls and then whatever the name is of the dependency. So in this case, it's protobuf.js. And then you can kind of track to see whether or not you're using it. And also npm, in this case, there was already a fix by Protobuf published. So you could use npm audit fix, but that didn't fix it for me. So this is how you fix it while you wait. So the first 30 minutes, the alert triggers, the CVE is identified, and the severity is marked critical. So I think for someone who, when you're reading all of your scans, critical is like, feels like a fire every time. Especially because mine is set up to only alert me if there is a high or critical for most of them. So what I had to do while I waited for my PR, in fact, I'll reverse because this is assuming you're not actually going to go report a PR. So I had to add a manual override to update my package to 7.5.5 in order for it to actually pull down the protobuf version that was changed. Otherwise, my software would still be using the vulnerable version while it waited for the open source to get the updated package version. So I think that's kind of where like the waiting time is it's like, okay, so we know that there's a fix available, but we're still waiting for everyone in the dependency tree to get the update. And so because of that, if you're not actively updating your own versions or doing overrides, if it's secure, then you're probably going to have to wait for something like that to happen. And so it takes a long time to remediate. It's not just like an instantaneous thing usually. So in my case, I submit a PR to literally just update, and this is what's funny about it, is the version was 7.5.3 when I got to it. I simply changed one number. I changed it from a 3 to a 5. That was my contribution. So nothing major. It was really actually simple, which is why I was able to submit a PR so quickly on it. But I still had to wait for the open source maintainers to review my PR and actually approve it. And that process in this case took about 4 weeks. So on average, the median time for all dependent NPM packages is actually about 14 months. So imagine waiting for your pipeline for 14 months to get a single number version bump in your supply chain software. So pretty long time to wait. Obviously, in this case, there wasn't a fire happening. I didn't need to, I wasn't really worried about it impacting me, but I still was worried about the impact in general. So that was why I submitted the PR. And I just wanted to know, like, what's the process? How long are you waiting? How easy is it to submit your first open source PR? It was actually pretty straightforward. But yeah, so I think that the big problem that supply chain's having right now is just like sheer inertia, just like waiting for updates. And speaking of updates, so while I was actually preparing these slides, I got an email on the PR because another developer noticed that Protoloader, which is an older version, is still being propagated. So even though my PR was merged, the entire like downstream consumer line still hasn't adopted the fix, and that requires more decisions and more owners. And also just, it's a timeline thing. It's 10 different people on a timeline trying to all work towards one common goal. And we're not all in communication, so we don't all work for a company where we're all working together to solve this one problem. It's a community-based thing. And I don't have a ton of examples because this was my first one. So, but this is what happens when it happens to you. Okay, so one thing that people were asking me to talk about, which I think is important, is the fact that just because it was a critical CVE, it actually wasn't that scary, because the actual number of exploitation, I don't know if I lost it, if it's on this side or another one. I think it's 1 to 6% of the time it actually gets exploited. So for the most part, I wasn't in huge risk, but it still is in itself a risk. So, you need to decide how much risk you're willing to consume or manage, and act as fast or as slow as you feel necessary.
I think I have two questions for you.
Sure.
First one is, can you define in your own words what is a CVE? This is the first question. The
Okay.
second question, you talk a lot about, I think in my word, a reachability analysis, even though you didn't mention reachability analysis. So maybe for the people who
I
don't
know.
really,
I like assuming everybody knows.
yeah, for the people who don't really know, so what is a CVE? What is reachability analysis? What is the difference between a false to a true positive?
Okay, cool. So CVE is common vulnerability enumeration, and so I guess this is kind of a good slide to answer it on. It's basically if somebody reports that they find a vulnerability, it gets assigned a CVE number based on XYZ criteria. Kind of a bad explanation. What was your second question, Tarek?
The second question was, so for example, I understand that there is a misconfiguration or security vulnerabilities, but what is the difference between a true to a false positive?
Okay, yeah. So the true or false positive, that is a tricky question because sometimes it will show up as a true or as a positive, but then when you actually go to remediate it, you'll find that it's not exploitable, which makes it a false positive. And I remember your other question, which is I was going to go back here and show you. This is the reachability analysis, essentially, in my case. So how, if I were an attacker and I wanted to exploit this CVE, how far or how hard would I have to work to reach it in order to actually execute an attack? So yeah, where was I? Hold on one second. Someone, yeah. There's a person waiting to be admitted. Hold on, guys. Okay.
And I love it. It's something that is really interesting with the group as well, is that we are from different background. So for you and I, for example, we understand what is CVE, true to false positive, reachability analysis, and so on. But maybe there are people who don't really have an AppSec background. That's why I was asking these kind of questions.
No, that's excellent. That's exactly why I love doing these and why I need the feedback, because sometimes I just say things that I know and then need to learn to explain them, and so this is a good opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
And yeah, I am relatively new to application security, so if I give imperfect explanations, let me know, and I'll try to drill down further. But yeah, so in this case, not super reachable, and even though the CVE was listed pretty high, I wouldn't say it was a false positive, but I wasn't too worried about it. So the other scenario that I was talking about earlier is that the bigger supply chain risk is not just the fact that we have CVEs. It's that most of our open source code, or most of our software, is built on open source code. And that code is ran by trusted maintainer accounts and or untrusted. And so you kind of have to decide when you're building software and you're pulling in your dependencies, you want to kind of do some research like on those dependencies and decide, do you trust the maintainer? Is it a legitimate publisher? One reason why you want to verify that is a really common exploit, or I guess supply chain problem, is what's called typo squatting. So that's like taking the name of the dependency and adding a typo to it. And so either a developer, or in this case, a lot of the times it's AI, pulls in a vulnerable package thinking it's like a legitimate package, and then instantaneously downloading that and potentially executing the malicious code or package. So when it comes to supply chain, especially if you're an engineer and you want to think about security, I would always, always, always encourage you to start with your dependencies. And maybe that's just because it's where I started. But I think it's because it's the easiest to, it's probably the biggest risk that I find my pipeline showing me, because as a developer, I'm not coding insecurely anymore as much, because I have things in place and I know how to. But the biggest problem my software always faces is the supply chain and the dependencies that I have. So that's why it's really important when you're starting a project and you're building it, you want to really consider, do I need this package? You know, is my software dependent on it, or is it something we can do on our own? If it is dependent on it, do I trust the publisher and the maintainers? And then, you know, obviously making sure it doesn't have any major CVEs, you know, when you download it, because sometimes even like with AI, it will pick older versions that are vulnerable. So if you're not checking which package version you're downloading, you could potentially be executing one that's not the right package and is risky. So yeah, so that's the bigger risk of supply chain, not just the fact that you trusted one and that one had a CVE published, but it's about the trust in general in your dependencies. So an example of this other supply chain concern is recently the NX console incident. So this one was huge because it impacted VS Code, which is, the reason it's a problem is because I think supply chain attackers are now focusing on things like the developer's environment. So attacking VS Code is a huge exploit. And so what happened is a single GitHub employee installed this NX console version extension that was published, and 2.2 million existing installs were impacted, and internal GitHub repositories were exfiltrated as a result. And so this was pretty big. It's been all over LinkedIn and everything. So it's kind of like, this is the bigger why of supply chain security, beyond just CVEs or, you know. So I think that this is probably the bigger risk if I were to be starting over. So, okay. So about 10.5% of malicious packages that are tracked by open source malware are attributed to a known threat actor group. So example of one of these right now, Team PCP is really all over the place, I guess. I've not stopped hearing about them. And so it's because they get clout and visibility. they give interviews, they actually name their malware. And so, that's the actual the amount of threat actor groups. But then the other percent is 89%. And those are people who we don't know. So, yeah, it's kind of, it's worth, if you don't already have like anywhere that you sign up for emails or notifications on supply chain alerts, I think it's, again, I'm just going to point out open source malware because they're one of my favorites, but it's good to have like a news source or something because these attacks are happening so fast right now. So let me see if there's a person.
And I think there is a question from Evan.
Oh, cool. Thanks for telling me.
Evan, you can ask your question. Okay. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Okay. Hi, Tarek. Thank you. Tawni, you were talking about third-party dependencies, and we were running a third-party tool. It was a .NET program, but it kept pointing to Java CVE and .NET CVE. We didn't even know about. They're a big commercial tool that we trusted. Yeah. So we were telling my team, is there any dependency checker? Like, can I just get open source dependency checker so I can find these before the third party reports to me next month? Oh, there's a new Java 1.8 CVE, whatever. There has to be a way of finding these in advance, right? Is there any tool I can develop? Can I ask Claude to develop dependency checker, or do you have to constantly check for third-party dependencies and hidden dependencies in a third-party tool? I think that
I love this question. This is such a good question, actually, because this tells me what I needed to explain. So I'll give you the yes, there is. So what this is called, so I have what's called a pipeline, and that's a really fancy way for saying I built security scanning into my GitHub actions so that I can do scanning that will alert me. So that is called software composition analysis, and that there are lots of tools available that you can use that will scan your dependencies and flag you as soon as any CVEs happen. So that's how I got the notification in this place, is because prior to building my pipeline, I wouldn't have known. I would have maybe heard, on the news later, or, reading, oh, there's a CVE. But in this case, I was alerted, and it was because I built an entire security pipeline that is intended to not only scan my software in its multiple states, but particularly the dependencies. So yeah, it's called software composition analysis. And I can't remember which one I used in this particular case, but yes, there is something you can do. And in fact, I'll probably, if you guys are all in the Google Drive, I'll send you some after notes so that you can kind of take a look at that. It's definitely worth getting some security scanning tools. A lot of them are free or have basic developer usage. So, you don't have to go all crazy like me and build a whole pipeline. You can just scan your GitHub repos, and that's like a good start. Also, GitHub Actions and GitHub has a lot of like built-in security things these days. So definitely worth checking, but that was a really, really good question. So let me know if that answers your question.
Yes, that helps. Thank you, Tawni.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so this is in my opinion where I think the supply chain situation is really struggling, and it's because there's really no incentive for people to manage open source software. So I kind of made like a little table to try to to see, okay, what's in it for you. So say you're the original researcher. All of these usually have, well, not all of them, but it's really common to have bug bounty programs. And so those pay out if you find and disclose a vulnerability to the company without, exploiting it. Because if you find it, you can exploit it. So the protocol is to disclose it, and when they do, they'll pay you out. Or you go on the gray market and you sell that for more money, usually. So a lot of the big supply chain attacks right now have been gray market sellers, at least that I've noticed. Seems like a pretty common thing, because there's a bit of an uproar with actually getting paid out for doing your research. And so I'll get to that in a slide later. And then in my case, I'm a downstream contributor. So, someone has already found and disclosed the vulnerability, but there was actually zero payout or incentive for me to go submit that PR to update the package version. So, again, security fairy, I didn't have anything in it for me. I just wanted to know what would happen. And obviously I wanted my own pipeline alerts to stop yelling at me, and remediate it. But for the organization itself, it's actually a pretty high cost. So it's a really low payout, but a really high cost. So it's kind of this, it's a budget thing. We're not really making enough room to manage our own open source code. Another case study is in spring 2026, a researcher published 6 different 0 days, which means 0 days are how quickly from when it was found to when you can execute it. So essentially this person, originally, this is where the main was in, because one of their original responses was to, it says, uncoordinated disclosures are never justifiable, and our digital crimes unit will continue bringing cases. So essentially the researcher that submitted it was being threatened with legal action. And then later they went and updated it and said that they had no intention of pursuing action against individuals conducting or publishing their security research. So this is important because security researchers need to be able to research and disclose without repercussion. So it's really the exploit that matters, not the research itself. And when in this particular case, I can't remember the name of the attacker. All I know is that they have an anime theme, but essentially they tried to disclose something or a vulnerability that they found, and then they didn't get paid out. So they became adversarial and started just publishing it without waiting that 30-day window, which is why it's a 0 day. So, okay. So this is the loud versus quiet. So if a researcher burns their relationship in public or drops the proof of concept of the working exploit and it forces the vendor, it will, in this case, it was 5 days. But if, let's see, what did I put here? Okay, so if a contributor like me patches it for free and then walks away with nothing, the whole system is just basically running on goodwill. So, I guess that's just my thing is if we're constantly waiting for people to take action or do something, then we're not actually remediating our supply chain. So I don't have a solution for this. I think this is an everybody thing. but my kind of goal with this talk was to encourage you, if you are building software, to check your dependencies. But if you find, in this case, it took me 30 minutes to submit this PR. Is that time that, say, if I was working for a company that they're going to pay? Probably not. Where, I'm independent, so I was like, it's 30 minutes. But most of the time, there's no incentive to do that. So I think if you find it and you can submit a PR, we appreciate the goodwill. I think all of the downstream people that were waiting on a PR merge would benefit from that, because I did move the needle from, the estimated 14 months to 4 weeks, but, that's just one case. So,
And one question as well, we haven't talked about it during this session. How are you using AI today? So first, what is the positioning for you for AI? Do you see it as a way for you to help you doing your job, or do you see it as well a threat vector?
That's a great question. So both. I think if you were to say why I want to be in security so bad, it is because of AI. And it's because, I'm going to use the phrase I don't like, but vibe coding. So because we trained a lot of our models on open source code, we essentially trained it on a lot of imperfect code. So I noticed AI was generating really insecure code for the beginning of my journey using it. And it's definitely got better, but I wouldn't say it can generate secure code naturally. I have to jump through hoops to get it to generate code as secure as I want. And so it is a huge attack vector and a huge threat, but at the same time, it's a force multiplier. And so I can build a full stack app in like a literal fraction of the time now. But can I do it securely? Yes. However, I feel like I have spent a lot of time just reviewing I spend more time reviewing my code now than I do actually typing it. So it goes from one extreme to the other. Like, we used to have to handwrite all of our code, and then, our review time was maybe less. And now I can generate an entire app really fast, but I'm spending more time reviewing it. And a lot of the review that I'm doing is related to security. So yes, really good question. I think that if you're a developer who is using AI, which I think majority of us are now, the security risk is pretty high, because I see AI do a lot of crazy things, like hallucinating packages, hallucinating package versions. I've had to go through really extreme like project spec or AI management so that it doesn't generate and automatically install. Because, for example, if you install like a malicious package before you've checked it, or you let your AI agent do it without checking it, and it executes, then you have just installed malicious software into you've even realized. So, I think AI makes it very easy malicious code or to generate it. So yeah, so definitely don't vibe thinking about security, at least.
I love it. I love it so much, because you're totally right. We used to spend 80% of the time writing code. now it's 80% of our time debugging, doing QA, and so on. I love it so much. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you. I appreciate it because I need the questions because I don't know. So the security part goes unreviewed by a lot of developers, I think, right now still, which is okay. We have security and engineering separately. So my favorite way to talk about open source is that it's an endless conveyor belt of patches. So meaning like we will probably be managing our open source code forever, and that's going to require consistent review, merges of our updates, and deployment. And because a lot of our software is using code that we didn't write ourselves and we're pulling in third parties code, that's increasing the timeline. So if it's something that's in your code base, it's obviously going to be faster. If you're waiting for your supply chain or your packages, you're waiting. If you're waiting for the PR in that package, you're waiting. So So basically, open source is pretty hardcore right now. And so that's why I think supply chain is probably the biggest thing to look at. So this is where we talk about the circle or the wheel of power that you have control over. So inside the walls of your software, you have your security pipeline. So this is where the scanning comes in. So thankfully, that allows me to scan and security testing that's on all of my applications in all of my repos. And you can also use a package manager override. So I'm sure if you're a developer and you've been using like Node, it will say you just have 15, critical and 14 high vulnerabilities, and you can just do npm audit fix. I remember doing that all the time before I actually knew. I just knew as a developer, I have to every time I build this do npm audit fix, but it's actually important and it's relatively easy to do. So just the little things, but outside of your walls, things you don't have control over. So maintainer timelines, other people's decisions on whether or not they actually merge the PR in the open source code, who owns the transitive dependency, and just the general pace of adoption throughout the ecosystem. So you can't control whether or not someone takes action, but you can control what actions you take inside your walls.
And just one thing, reminder, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm almost there. This is the end. Look at that. So this is my question I want to leave with everybody. So if it's not the software you build, it's not the tooling or the security scanning or the open source code. Whose job is it to close the loop of vulnerable software? Like, I know there's probably not a perfect answer, but I wanted you guys to take away, in a perfect world, we would obviously not have this problem. And I don't know what a perfect world looks like, but I think it comes down to ownership. So it's like, are you willing to own the action? And if so, great, do that, close the loop. So yeah. This is my Q&A panel. I just put some random ones on here, but if you guys have questions and answers or questions, I have a couple minutes to give answers. And here are my sources.
I think we will share as well the presentation if you want on the WhatsApp and in the university as well. Like that, people can actually ask you question over there on the WhatsApp group. And then I would love for you to do a second session. I think it would be amazing.
Yeah, I love that. I think I definitely have some room for improvement when it comes to explaining some of these things because we are a mixed group.
No, you did great. I didn't want you to open the a dictionary and tell me what was the CVE. No, what was important was tell me for you what is a CVE with your own definition. I think it's way more, for me at least, it's way better when you are authentic than when you try to have like real strict definition.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you
No,
did great.
that's great feedback, because occasionally when it comes down to it, my instinct is almost to try to use all of the jargon. But I'm really trying to use less jargon. So
No, but CVE is CVE. It's just
Yeah.
that sometimes we need to explain what is CVE. But CVE, no, for the people who know, like it's fine, and we can give sources as well on the CVE and all. But you did to be honest amazing. I was not supposed to be here today, but I loved it so much.
Well, I'm glad you came, because I really
Me too.
appreciate your support. So yeah, you guys feel free, hit me up on LinkedIn, hit me up on WhatsApp, message me if you have questions. If you are inspired, go build your pipeline. Seriously, it's a lot scarier than it sounds. You can build a pretty simple pipeline to do your security scanning on your software. And you can start with software composition analysis is what it's called. And that will allow you to scan your dependencies. So, yeah, I guess that's the end of my talk. I don't have anything else to say. So if you guys have any other questions, now would be a good time.
Let's continue on WhatsApp because I know that is going to stop right now. So thank you so much. And I'm really excited for the next session with you.
Thank you so much. I hope
Great.
you guys have a great weekend.
You
Thank
too.
you, guys.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you. Bye.